A man stands in the shadow of a crumbling stone wall in Jerusalem. The air tastes of ash and copper. Isaiah shouts in the temple courtyard. Jeremiah weeps in the burning streets. Ezekiel performs strange, desperate street theater to shake the masses awake, to be supported, to be physically steady. It is the architectural term for a pillar holding up a heavy roof. To see what this actually looks like in flesh and bone, you have to unroll the scroll backward to the book of Exodus. Chapter 17. The very first time the root of this word appears in the text. It has absolutely nothing to do with religion. Moses is standing on a hill in the brutal heat. A battle is raging in the valley below. As long as he holds his wooden staff in the air, the Israelites push the enemy back. But his arms grow heavy. The muscles burn. His limbs begin to shake. And the staff dips. So 2 men push a rock under him. They stand on either side. They grab his wrists. And they hold his arms up. The text says his hands remained steady until the sun went down. The Hebrew word for steady is emunah. That root changes everything. When God tells Habakkuk that the righteous will live by emunah, he is not demanding intellectual certainty. He is not asking the prophet to understand the terrifying math of the Babylonian invasion. He is demanding a stance. Emunah is not a feeling of inner peace. It is the refusal to move when the ground shakes. The answer is not an explanation. It is a posture. They speak to the earth on behalf of heaven. But if you unroll the ancient parchment of Habakkuk, but living out that posture will force the prophet to face an echo of empire that stretches far beyond the ancient world. The divine voice does not stop at the definition of faith. God unrolls the blueprint of human arrogance. Standing on the watchtower, the prophet listens as the Creator dictates 5 woes against the Babylonian machine. It is a terrifyingly precise indictment of a system that consumes human lives for profit. The first woe hits the extortionist piling up stolen goods. The second hits the elite, building their nests high up, safe from the disaster below. The third strikes the empire builder, laying foundation stones in innocent blood. The fourth targets the leader, using shame to strip their neighbors bare. The fifth mocks the powerful, bowing down to a block of silver they carved themselves. But step back from the ancient desert. Look at the trajectory of human history. Babylon is not just a geographic coordinate on an ancient map. It is a recurring pattern. Every century builds it. Every generation deals with it. We build systems that extract wealth from the vulnerable. We stack digital gold in cold servers, while the physical streets outside fill with desperate people. We pour concrete over stolen land. We draft corporate policies that smell like wet mortar and crushed bone. We manufacture influence. We consume. We expand. You will not find a single verse addressed to humanity. Not one. He turns his back to the crowd. He faces the silence. We build our own watchtowers out of stock portfolios. Military dominance and algorithmic control. The specific empire changes. The appetite does not. Babylon is not a dead civilization. It is the operating system of the modern world. But God makes a chilling observation in chapter 2. Verse 13. He says the labor of the oppressors is ultimately just fuel for the fire. They are exhausting themselves for absolutely nothing. The stone in the wall will cry out against them. The beam in the woodwork will echo the chant. You cannot build a lasting city on a foundation of human misery. The math simply does not work. The universe is hardwired for justice, and gravity always wins. God assures the prophet that the Babylonian war machine will eventually be swallowed by the exact same violence it used to swallow the earth. The debt will be called in. The ledger will be balanced. But knowing that the empire will eventually fall does not fix the immediate terror of living inside it. Habakkuk knows the Chaldeans are still coming. He knows the limestone walls of Jerusalem will shatter. He knows the temple will burn, and his people will be dragged away in chains. The theological answer is settled. The real question of this tiny 3-chapter text isn't what God is saying to a broken world, but the physical storm is just beginning to break. So the prophet does the only thing left to do when the world is ending. He begins to sing. He does not step down from the watchtower to draft a surrender. He does not weep. He asks for a stringed instrument, and he writes a war song. Habakkuk chapter 3 is one of the most violent, breathtaking pieces of poetry in the ancient library. The musical direction at the top of the parchment says it is to be played on shigianoth, a Hebrew musical term that implies a wild, erratic, highly emotional rhythm. He stands on the limestone wall, facing the impending Babylonian slaughter, and he looks backward. He sings about the Exodus. He sings about the fire on Sinai. He sings of a God whose brilliance is like the sunrise, with lightning flashing from his hands. He sings of a creator who steps onto the earth, and the nations violently shake. The ancient mountains crumble to dust. The deep oceans roar and lift their watery hands in surrender. The sun and the moon freeze in their tracks at the flash of his flying arrows. Plague marches before him. Pestilence follows at his heels. He tramples the sea with his horses, churning the great waters to crush the head of the wicked and save his anointed people. He is recalling the terrifying, unstoppable momentum of the divine warrior. It is this: what do you do when heaven becomes complicit by its silence? This is a dangerous question. The song is not a denial of the coming darkness. It is a stake driven deep into the ground of history. Habakkuk is praying for an echo. I have heard what you did in the past. Now do it again in our time. In the middle of the years, make it known. In wrath, remember mercy. But remembering the raw power of God does not erase the physical toll of waiting for the storm. Habakkuk hears the divine decree, and his physical body begins to shut down. He writes in verse 16 that his heart violently pounds against his ribs. His lips quiver at the sound. Decay creeps into his bones, and his legs shake beneath him in the dust. The adrenaline of his courtroom interrogation has faded, leaving only the terrifying, visceral reality of what is about to happen to his city. He must wait patiently for the day of calamity to arrive. Because a beautiful song about the Exodus does not stop a Babylonian iron chariot. A theological poem about the Red Sea does not feed a starving family when the siege ramps are finally pushed against the walls. What happens to a person's faith when the music fades? The sky goes completely dark, and heaven still refuses to intervene. What happens when the worst-case scenario actually arrives? The prophet gives us the final words of his scroll. It is the kind of question that polite, comfortable religion tries to quickly paper over with platitudes. But this prophet refuses to look away, and they form one of the most staggering declarations ever recorded in human history. He lists the complete collapse of the agricultural economy, the lifeblood of his ancient world. Though the fig tree does not bud, though there are no grapes on the vines, though the olive crop fails, the fields produce no food, the sheep die in the pen, and the cattle stalls sit completely empty. The sensory reality of those verses is absolute devastation. It is the smell of withered vines snapping in the heat, the sight of cracked dirt where the barley should be, the hollow, haunting echo of an empty stone barn. It is the physical ache of waking up and realizing the structures you relied on to survive have been violently stripped away. And then, in verse 18, Habakkuk pivots. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in God my Savior. This is not religious optimism. It is a calculated defiance. He is looking directly at the impending destruction of his city, and he is choosing to plant his feet on the character of God when the actions of God are completely incomprehensible to his mind. This is what Imuna looks like when the pillar is carrying the maximum weight of a collapsing roof. It is the grit to hold the agonizing tension between a devastating earthly reality and an unchanging divine nature. If you have ever watched an innocent life get crushed by a broken system, or seen the violent inherit the earth, if you are in a season right now where the branches of your own life are completely bare, if the medical report did not change, if the relationship still fractured, if the future you poured your life into has turned to dust in your hands, if you are standing in the wreckage of what you thought heaven was going to build, the book of Habakkuk is an invitation to do something radical. You do not have to pretend the pain is an illusion. You do not have to smile and recite hollow, plastic platitudes about everything happening for a reason. God did not ask the prophet to pretend Babylon was a blessing in disguise. He did not ask him to suppress his horror. God is not asking you to deny the army marching toward your walls. He is asking you to climb the watchtower anyway. He is asking you to let the sorrow and the fear violently shake your physical frame, but to refuse to let it snap your allegiance to the one who rules the wind and the sea. In the final verse, Habakkuk says, "The sovereign Lord is his strength. He makes his feet like the feet of a deer, enabling him to tread on the terrifying, jagged heights." Because when the dust of human history finally settles, and the empires of this world are buried under the weight of their own violence, something beautiful and entirely indestructible remains, while the gentle are pushed into the dirt. You have stood on this wall. You have felt the agonizing friction between the theology you were. The prophet steps down from the limestone wall. The scroll is written. The Babylonian chariots are still coming. The geopolitical storm is still going to break over the city. But the man walking back down into the dust of Jerusalem is no longer the same. He watched the courts of his city rot, and he hurled a violent accusation at the sky. He demanded a sudden rescue, and heaven unleashed an empire of blood. He climbed the highest watchtower to argue, and the Creator told him to carve a vision into stone. He waited for a logical explanation, and he received the posture of Emunah. He saw the ultimate war machine on the horizon, and he wrote a wild song of the Exodus. He felt the terrifying silence of the divine, and he chose to sing in the barren field. He watched the fig tree wither to dust, and he found the strength to walk on the jagged heights. One ancient argument, one indestructible faith. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the rock under Moses' arms, the root of Emunah. When Habakkuk was told the righteous will live by their faith, he was not being handed a psychological trick to feel better about the Babylonians, taught and the brutal reality you are watching unfold. Habakkuk is not offering a bumper sticker to make the pain go away. He was being handed the grip of two friends on a burning hill, holding up the heavy, shaking arms of a man who could no longer hold them up himself. Your faith is not your ability to understand the math of the universe. It is your refusal to move when the ground gives way. If you are in a season where heaven feels completely silent, and the structures you relied on are crumbling, you do not have to fake a smile. You do not have to pretend the withered vines are actually blooming. You are allowed to carry your grief, your confusion, and your traumas straight up the watchtower. If this opens something in you, subscribe. Leave a comment, even one word helps. Share this with someone who is waiting in the dark right now. Pray for us as we keep digging into these ancient texts. And may the God, who is never intimidated by your questions, hold your arms steady when you are too tired to stand, and meet you in the absolute center of the storm. He is not writing a textbook on patience. He is writing a subpoena. To feel the absolute shock of this moment, you have to. The year is roughly 605 BC, and down in the streets below, the powerful are swallowing the weak. Step into the dust of the late 7th century BC. You have to hear the exact word he chooses to hurl at the throne of God, because he is about to pick a fight that will change the course of history. To understand the sheer audacity of this book, you have to look at the job description of an ancient Near Eastern prophet. The mechanics of the prophetic office were remarkably consistent. A man or a woman is pulled out of their ordinary life. A shepherd brushing dirt off his tunic. A priest standing in the smoky, blood-scented courtyard of the temple, and they are given a burden. The Hebrew word is masa. It is a heavy, physical weight placed onto their shoulders. Their job is to carry that weight into the public square and drop it on the nation. The trajectory of the communication is always top-down. God speaks. The prophet listens. The people are warned. You see this pattern etched into the parchment of almost every other prophetic scroll. They smash clay jars in the streets to demonstrate the coming shattering of the nation. They stand at the gates of the city, their voices cracking as they call out the corruption of the priests and the greed of the judges. They are the alarm bell ringing in the night, the voice of God piercing. The courts are bought and sold with heavy bags of silver. The king is bleeding his own citizens dry to build luxury palaces with cedar ceilings. through the thick fog of human rebellion. But Habakkuk breaks the template. The trajectory of this book is not top-down. It is violently bottom-up. From the very first line, the camera angle is completely reversed. Habakkuk does not claim to have a message for the citizens of Judah. He does not pull a scroll from his cloak, raise his hands, and declare, "Thus says the Lord." Instead, he takes the agony, the confusion, and the blood-soaked reality of the streets, and he hurls it straight up into the heavens. This text is not a sermon delivered to the people. It is an interrogation leveled at the Creator. Even his name hints at the friction. Habakkuk. It is a strange, rugged word, rooted in the Hebrew verb chabak, which means to embrace, or to fold the arms tightly. But in the ancient world, an embrace was not always an act of affection. It was the exact same word used for a wrestler, locking their arms around an opponent in the dust. He is holding on, and he refuses to let go until he gets an explanation. And the reality he is holding on to is tearing his mind apart. The good king, Josiah, is dead, slaughtered in a meaningless battle. His son, Jehoiakim, now sits on the throne in Jerusalem, and he is a tyrant of the worst kind. He extracts forced labor, while the righteous are cornered like prey in the alleys of their own holy city. You can hear the shouting bouncing off the limestone, to cut the limestone for his walls. He taxes the starving peasants to build himself a palace layered in imported cedar. The courts are rigged. The innocent are crushed. Habakkuk looks at this societal collapse, and he realizes the most terrifying part is not the cruelty of the human king. It is the silence of the divine king. If God is just, why is the machinery of justice completely broken, while heaven does absolutely nothing? So the prophet opens his mouth, and he chooses a specific Hebrew word to summarize his reality. And it is the exact same word that once caused God to drown the entire world. The prophet stands in the dust of Jerusalem. The smell of burning refuse drifts up from the valley. He raises his head. He speaks into a terrifyingly clear sky. How long, O Lord, must I call for help, but you do not listen? This is Habakkuk chapter 1, verse 2. He is not asking a polite theological question. He is screaming into a void, or cry out to you. Violence, but you do not save? The English word used in almost every modern translation here is violence, but the word Habakkuk actually shouts at the heavens is the Hebrew noun chamas. Chamas means physical brutality. You can feel the heavy, suffocating heat of a society tearing itself apart from the inside. And the man on the wall is not writing a sermon, but its range of meaning is much wider than a swung fist or a drawn sword in a dark alley. It is cold. Systemic oppression. It is the judge accepting silver under the table. It is the widow stripped of her ancestral land. It is the tearing down of the moral fabric of a society until only the ruthless survive. It is cruelty legalized. And if you know your ancient scrolls, that word makes your blood run cold. Because chamas does not appear here for the first time. You have to unroll the parchment all the way back to the beginning. Genesis chapter 6, verse 11. The text says, "The earth was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with chamas." It is the exact condition that triggered the flood. It is the disease that broke the world so thoroughly that God tore the heavens open, unleashed the deep, and washed the planet clean to start over. That root changes everything about Habakkuk's complaint. He is not just observing that society has gone bad. He is holding God to his own historical standard. He is essentially saying, "You drowned a world for this. You erased human civilization to wipe this exact disease from the earth. And now it is happening in your own city. Now it is happening in the shadow of your own temple. And you sit there with your arms folded." He is not holding a scroll of warning for the crowds. He is looking up at a sky that is completely, terrifyingly clear. Chamas is not just a description of human crime. It is an accusation of divine hypocrisy. The law is paralyzed. The courts are poisoned. The wicked surround the righteous like a net. Justice comes out twisted, unrecognizable, gasping for air. He lists the symptoms. He points at the rot. He demands God wake up and do something. He expects fire. He expects a sudden, righteous cleansing. He expects God to strike the corrupt king and heal the land. And God finally breaks the silence. God finally answers the subpoena. But the response rolling out of the heavens is not a promise of peace. It is not a sudden flash of deliverance for the righteous. It is a nightmare walking over the horizon. When a society begs heaven for justice, it usually has a very specific mechanism in mind. We want God to perform a surgical strike. We want the corrupt leaders removed, the rigged courts overturned, and the oppressors quietly dealt with, all while our own lives remain completely undisturbed. We want the rot cut out, but we want the comfortable house left standing. God tells Habakkuk to look out at the geopolitical horizon, look at the nations and watch and be utterly amazed. And he is doing something that men of his profession are never supposed to do. He is putting God on trial. For I am going to do something in your days that you would not believe, even if you were told. Then the text drops a historical anvil. God is raising up the Chaldeans, the Babylonians. To the ancient mind, this is not a rescue operation. This is the apocalypse. The Neo-Babylonian war machine was the most terrifying, ruthless imperial power the world had ever seen. The biblical text describes their advance with chilling sensory precision. Their horses are swifter than leopards and more fierce than wolves hunting in the evening dark. They sweep across the desert like a scorching eastern wind, scooping up human captives as easily as a child gathers sand. They laugh at kings. They mock fortified cities. They build dirt ramps against towering limestone walls and simply walk over them. Habakkuk asked God to cure the disease of his nation. The cure God reveals is not a surgical scalpel. It is an amputation. If feeling the uncomfortable, unvarnished friction of the biblical text is stirring up questions you have never considered, you are exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe. Because every week, we go deeper into these ancient scrolls than you knew was possible. So the Babylonian army begins to march. The theological crisis this creates is almost impossible to overstate. Most people assume they know how a biblical prophet operates. They act as a megaphone for the divine. Habakkuk complained about the Chamas, the internal violence and systemic corruption inside the borders of Judah. But Babylon is the empire of ultimate violence. They drag conquered populations away with iron hooks through their lips. They worship their own military might. The text explicitly states that these invaders make their own physical strength their god. How can a holy creator use an utterly unholy weapon to achieve justice? If your own people are wicked, how can the divine answer be to hand them over to an empire that is exponentially worse? It is like trying to cure a local fever by setting the entire house on fire. This is the profound intellectual collision at the center of the book. Most religious leaders, when faced with a divine decree this terrifying, would simply bow their heads in silent resignation. They would tell the people to prepare for the inevitable and submit to the dark mystery of the divine will. But the man whose name means to wrestle does not submit. He turns his back on the approaching army. He finds the highest stone watchtower in the city, and he climbs it. He places his hands on the rough limestone. He climbs. He scales the watchtower, pushing himself up above the noise of the city, above the corrupt courts and the weeping widows. The wind sweeping off the eastern desert is cold. Habakkuk chapter 1. Verse 1. A holy messenger pointing a rigid finger at a disobedient nation, warning them of the storm gathering on the horizon. I will stand at my watch and station myself on the ramparts. I will look to see what he will say to me, and what answer I am to give to this complaint. He braces himself against the stone. He waits for the counter-argument. God answers him. But the Creator does not offer a schedule. He does not provide a geopolitical map showing exactly how the Babylonian invasion will ultimately serve the greater good. Instead, God tells the prophet to grab a stylus. He tells him to carve the vision into tablets, to make the letters so large and so clear that a herald running past can read them without slowing down. And then, God draws a stark line between two types of people. He points to the arrogant, the Babylonian Empire, and the corrupt Judean king whose souls are puffed up and misaligned. And then he points to the righteous. Habakkuk 2. Verse 4. But the righteous person will live by his faith. This is one of the most famous verses in the biblical library. But the word translated faith here is the Hebrew noun emunah. We hear the word faith in the modern West, and we immediately think of intellectual agreement, a mental checklist of theological doctrines, a feeling of internal spiritual certainty. But emunah is not a mental exercise. Its root is the Hebrew verb aman, which means to be firm,